Have you ever felt like you were living in two seasons at the same time? The reason I say that is because over the years I've learned that life isn't always one thing or another thing. Sometimes you're grieving and growing at the same time. Sometimes you're losing and building. Sometimes you're devastated, yet somehow still aware that the hand of God is on your life. And what the enemy always tries to do is magnify our problems until that's the only thing that we can see. He wants our pain to become bigger than God's presence, bigger than God's faithfulness, bigger than his promises. I say this because a few years ago I lost my 18-year-old nephew. It was sudden. The family didn't see it coming. It was a huge blow, and that grief was so heavy. I felt like I was moving through like a fog. Some days I was just trying to make it through to the next hour. I could barely function. I wasn't thinking about purpose. I wasn't thinking about vision. I was trying to survive the weight of what had happened. Yet during that very same season, my group home in Gettysburg was opening. And that is what confused me, right? Because Gettysburg wasn't just another business that I was starting. It wasn't just another building. It represented a dream that God had placed in my heart so many years ago. I wanted to create a home where sibling groups, right, they could stay together even when they were removed from their parents. And I had prayed for it. I had worked for it. I sacrificed for it. So while my nephew's passing represented a season dying, this group home represented a season being born. And I remember wrestling with that. How could one of the most painful seasons of my life exist right alongside of one of the greatest answers to a prayer I had ever received? And I thought seasons were supposed to make sense, I thought that grief meant everything would be dark. And I thought that being blessed meant that everything would be good and joyful. But God doesn't work that way. And sometimes the rain is falling while the seeds are growing. Sometimes God is healing one area of your life while another area is breaking your heart. And sometimes the tears are in one hand and a testimony in another hand. I've learned that seasons don't always arrive one at a time, like we're usually taught. Sometimes an ending and a beginning share the same space. And sometimes God is closing one chapter while he's opening another chapter. Sometimes you're standing at a funeral in one area of your life while witnessing a resurrection in another area of your life. And if we're not careful, we'll become so focused on what we lost that we completely miss what God is doing right in front of us. And that's not minimizing grief, right? That's not pretending the pain isn't real. The pain was real. The loss was real. The tears were real. But so was God's hand. So was God's faithfulness. So was his provision. So was his promise. So if you're in a season where your heart is breaking, don't assume God stopped moving. And if you're in a season where God is blessing you, don't feel guilty because you're still grieving. You may be standing in two seasons at the same time. And I've learned that the fact that something is dying doesn't mean nothing is growing. And sometimes the greatest evidence of God's faithfulness is not that he removes the pain, is that he continues to bring life even while we're walking through that pain.